How long have you guys been there? Intro. Off camera. Coming in. Funny jokes. Hello and welcome back to the workshop. Now, this isn't going to be one of our normal build videos today. My brother came for a visit and he brought along a guitar that was given to him that, for lack of a better term, someone did a good number on. So our main goal is with this Les Paul Jr. copy to try and make it as playable as we can. My brother and I have discussed a number of things that he wants to do, so we're going to take a look into it, and I've got a few plans of my own to get this back up to where it's supposed to be. Now, cosmetically, we're not going to do anything with it, so this is not a full restoration. We are just trying to get it to play as good as possible. He's already gone ahead and swapped out some of the hardware, so the tuning keys have been replaced. He has a replacement bridge, but it has the posts that were on here originally. One of the first things we're going to do is we're going to drill for the post holes. And let's take a closer look at what we've got here. So this is a sparxx guitar. From what I could find on the company, it looks like they do a handful of copies of popular manufacturers. This one is a Les Paul Jr., obviously a Gibson. The key thing to note about this one is it looks like the person who had it resprayed this top, didn't really use a instrument grade paint. We are not going to be doing anything with that. I'm just going to try and clean it as best I can to make sure that it doesn't flake away. As you can see, there's already some chips here. But essentially, these look like they were glorified kits that this person put together and used some of his own parts or part choices on and then slapped his name on the headstock. He really liked the floating tailpiece, so we're going to try and keep that. He put a new Wilkinson bridge on here, which will work just fine, and the spacing and intonation is all set much better than it was with the other bridge that was on here. But this tailpiece is slightly cocked to the left here, and we need to bring it back here. Now, we had talked about bending these, which would be doable, but I honestly think that I'm just going to have to pull these and re-drill the holes a little. The other thing we're going to address is this nut doesn't look like it was slotted properly. So I'm going to try this bone nut that is already pre-cut. See how well that fits. It looks like the spacing is pretty close already as it is. We may have to tweak it, or I may have to carve a brand new one. But we'll get to that once we get to that. I want to address this mess right here before I start getting into anything else. Now, unfortunately, these marks in the paint are going to stay here. They're not the prettiest looking things, but this paint wasn't really done well, and as you can see, it's already wearing away from the edges all the way around here. For me personally, I'd love to do a retop on it, but that's an expensive process, so we're just trying to get it playable. So the first thing to do would be to take the strings off and start getting our placement for the new parts and the placement for the movement of that tailpiece. Okay, so here's what we're working with. I've got all the strings but two taken off so that I can help line up the bridge and the tailpiece. I want to line up the tailpiece first before I take these off. So a good way to do that is there is one of two things you can do. You can take a pencil. The nice thing about pencil is that it will rub off of any finish for the most part, as long as you don't dig in. So the pencil will give us a mark to line up on, or you can just use masking tape, and masking tape will just pull right off. I myself am going to go with masking tape. I use this painter's tape because it doesn't stick down very hard. You know, no fuss, no muss. We don't want to have anything with too much tack to it because that can start pulling things up. And because this is already pretty fragile as it is, I don't want to put anything with any high tack on there because it could start pulling up where it's chipped at. So I basically just want to kind of motivate this to go into where I want it to go. And I'm just going to take a little piece here and basically kind of mark with the tape where I want it to fall. Roundabout. We'll get a more fine measurement once we get all the pieces off, but this gives me at least the area that I am aiming for. So now with that marked off, we can loosen up the strings and try and locate where I'm going to drill the new holes on this bridge. As you can see, all that was holding it on there is the paint, which is a little unfortunate that that came out the way it did, because I was trying to avoid doing any of that, but it seemed like it was necessary. So now I'm going to find my pencil mark here again and try and line up where that bridge should roughly go. So I'm going to go ahead and put some tension back on these strings just to put them in place. And the added tension just kind of holds it all in place. And surprisingly enough, that landed pretty close to where he had it sitting originally. Now with that off there already, I can see where this person filled the original holes, and this must have been a pretty wide bridge because that doesn't fit right on there. Next thing I want to address is going to be the tailpiece before I start drilling any of those holes. So I'm going to carefully take this off. So now that we got that, we can drill holes for the bridge post. I just wanted to set that tailpiece just to make sure that it was laying where it should be. And since I think we got that, I think we're good to move on. Alright, to drill the holes, I want them to be straight and true. So I'm going to bring this over to the drill press. There's not really a whole lot of room over there, so I'm not going to show you me drilling. But essentially, I've got my pilot holes here. I know where to drill them into, and I'm just going to drill straight down. And then I've got to drill one for a ground wire because there was not one put in this one. Or at least if there was, it is in the holes that they have since covered up. So starting to drill into that and bit perplexed. It seems that they left the original post mount in there, which is going to be a bit of a pain. So I'm going to contact my brother and see what he wants to do about that. We'll check back in. Drilling it out with that metal in there was quite a pain, but after I got it and touched it up a little bit, not the exact color, but very close. A lot less noticeable than where that metal piece was, but here's where we stand. We got it in there. We got it at the right angle. Now it's just a matter of popping that tailpiece back on there. So I popped this nut off here, and one, they used a obscene amount of glue, so at the very start I'm gonna have to re-flatten this whole thing. I've already got it started part of the way, but after looking at this nut, you can see here that it's one of the cheap plastic ones that are hollow on the inside, and it's just real gnarly and dirty and is not quite cut correctly. So we're going to switch it out for this bone nut. So I'm going to have to go ahead and flatten this first, and then I'm going to have to square up this bone nut, which is cut pretty perfectly for this. So I just need to trim a little off the end here and square off the bottom, and then I can get my final height for this. But first, I have to deal with this mess here. So when I try and re-square off these things, I take a file that's flat across the edge here. So I can get a flat end up against the fretboard, but then the cutting teeth are on the bottom. So that way, if you hold really carefully against the fretboard, that helps square out that pocket. Hopefully, being that this glue is really rough, it should chip away pretty nicely, and then that'll give me a clean face to put the new nut down on. Now I'm going to go a few passes, then I'm just going to take a straight edge just to see how close we are. And that's looking pretty good. You can check square by laying it flat against it. And it looks pretty square all the way across, which is also good. So then we are all set to square off the bottom of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck it up into this. This has got some fine wheels so that I can run it across a flat surface, and then that will flat out that end. You always want to make sure that the flattest part of the nut is on the inside, because that's the part that's going to clamp down to that surface. So I'm not going to take much off. I just want to flatten that face, so then I can get the height off of the frets for the final dimensions of this. Alright, now that that's nice and squared up, I can now take a pencil and mark where that line is to see where my height on the strings is supposed to be. So just as before, I use my ruler and I tape a piece of lead to it. That gives me the flattest point that I can go. And then I just rest it across the top of the frets. And I slowly mark with a pencil where that's going to lie. Now once you've done that, that gives you a finite line as to where that's going to end up. Now because this one is already notched, I am not going to end up notching this. What I am going to do is I'm going to see how far from the actual slot that is. And I'm just going to test a few of these. And then I'm going to remove that amount of material from the very bottom of it. Now the trick here is that's the bottomed out part of my line. So I'm going to get as close as I can to that without going over, and then check my height from there and continue to take off more as needed. And then when all is said and done, going back and forth a bit, you should have a nice even nut that is cut perfectly for that slot. Now I'm going to go ahead and, now that I got the nut squared away, I'm going to go ahead and do the setup, put the rest of the strings on, and get it tuned up. And just like that, we're tuned up, we're set up, and we're ready to go. Everything is lined back up where it's supposed to be. We've swapped out some parts to help with the sustain and the tuning. Sometimes some simple upgrades is really all it takes to make a cheap guitar play nice. Now in a few instances on this guitar, it did throw me for a loop because of what this person did while he modified it beforehand. But all in all, we've got it up and running, and it plays nice. If you like videos like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments. I would be happy to do more videos like this if that's what you're looking for. Little tips, tricks. Now oftentimes repairs aren't all that in-depth. You're only doing a few things here and there, so I may not do all of the repairs, but I'll find some of the more interesting ones and do videos of those if that's what you guys would like to see. With that, we'll see you in the next one.